Imagine a sliver of darkness, a winding canyon so narrow you can stretch out your arms and almost touch both sides. For over a kilometer, this is your entire world. The sandstone walls, layered in waves of rose and ochre, tower hundreds of feet above, silencing the desert wind. And then, just as the claustrophobia begins to set in, the darkness relents. A sliver of impossible architecture appears, a facade of pillars and statues carved directly from the living rock, glowing in the borrowed light. This is Petra, a metropolis of impossible beauty built in a place that should have been uninhabitable. The question that hangs in the dry air is not just who built this, but how. How did a lost civilization conjure an oasis from bare rock and unforgiving sand? We are about to journey deep into the secrets of the Nabataeans, the forgotten masters who bent the desert to their will. Their story is one of breathtaking ingenuity and a fatal miscalculation that would see their entire world vanish into legend. To follow us down this ancient path and uncover the full story of how empires rise and fall, be sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell. You will not want to miss where this trail leads. Now, let us step out of the shadows and into the sunlight of a city that should not exist. To understand Petra, we must first understand its creators, the Nabataeans. Before they were master architects, they were nomads, people of the tent and the caravan. They knew the desert not as an enemy, but as a complex map of hidden resources. For centuries, they crisscrossed the Arabian Peninsula, their lives dictated by the rhythm of trade and the location of the next hidden spring. They were the undisputed lords of the arid wastes. Their true genius, the spark that would ignite an empire, was a revolutionary idea. They realized that water was more valuable than gold. More than that, they understood that whoever controlled the water controlled everything. Let's walk with them in our minds, back to the 3rd century before the Common Era. As we move through this very same canyon, the Psyche, look up. What we are witnessing is not just a geological marvel, it is the foundation of an entire civilization. The Nabataeans saw this narrow passage not as an entrance, but as a colossal rain gutter. They meticulously carved channels along its entire length, guiding every precious drop of the rare flash floods into a sophisticated network. The system was a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering. Clay pipes, seamlessly joined together, fed the water into hundreds of vast cisterns, some capable of holding millions of gallons, all hidden deep within the rock. They built dams to slow the torrents and redirect their power. It was an urban water grid on a scale the world had never seen, and it was all powered by gravity and genius. The result of this mastery was a miracle. While the world around them was a canvas of scorched earth and shimmering heat, Petra bloomed. We can almost picture the public fountains splashing, the lush gardens heavy with the scent of figs and dates, and even a grand swimming pool for the city's elite. They had not just found water, they had manufactured an ecosystem. This oasis became the ultimate destination, a safe haven where travelers and their exhausted camels could drink their fill, rest in the shade, and marvel at the city that had tamed the desert. This life-giving water transformed Petra from a hidden refuge into the most vital and strategic hub in the ancient world. And with that control came wealth beyond imagination. The Nabataeans held a monopoly on the most valuable commodity of the age, incense. Frankincense and myrrh, resins harvested from trees in southern Arabia, were essential to the temples of Rome, the rituals of Egypt, and the palaces of Persia. They were the scent of divinity, the currency of prayer. And the only safe land route for these priceless goods ran directly through Nabataean territory, with Petra as its jewel box and its vault. Every caravan that passed paid a toll, not in coins, but in a percentage of their precious cargo. The Nabataeans became the world's most successful middlemen, building a kingdom literally on the perfume of the gods. This city of rose and red rock became a testament to their success. It was a bustling cosmopolitan center where Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Arabian cultures met and mingled. Let your eyes wander over the treasury's facade once more. We see the influence of Alexandria in its columns, the gods of the Greek world in its sculptures, all fused with a uniquely Nabataean spirit. For a fleeting few centuries, they had achieved the impossible. They had built an unbreachable fortress, an economic powerhouse, and a cultural paradise, all sustained by a delicate and brilliant system of their own invention. Here, at their zenith, they stood as the absolute masters of their domain, convinced that the foundations they had laid in stone and water were eternal. But a city of stone is only as strong as the people who inhabit it. To truly grasp the soul of Petra, we must look past the magnificent facades and into the minds of its creators. So who were the Nabataeans? They were not an empire of marching legions or vast ancestral lands. Their kingdom was one of knowledge, a kingdom of secrets whispered on the desert wind. Let us peel back the layers of myth and time to understand the character of these elusive people. Their story begins not with a throne, but with a camel's saddle and a water skin. Their nomadic past was not something they shed. It was the very bedrock of their urban civilization. Unlike the Romans or the Greeks who sought to dominate nature and bend it into orderly lines, the Nabataeans saw themselves as its partners. They did not conquer the desert. They listened to it. They knew the language of the winds, the subtle shifts in the color of the sand that promised a hidden well, and the paths of the stars that guided them through landscapes that would kill a lesser traveler in a single day. As we explore their society, we find a profound pragmatism, a mindset born from a life where one mistake could mean the end. They had no room for ideological purity or artistic snobbery. If an idea worked, they used it. This is why Petra feels like a beautiful, coherent dream of a dozen different cultures. We can see their genius for adaptation everywhere. The Nabataeans were the ultimate curators of the ancient world. They would see the elegant columns of a Greek temple in Alexandria and think, we can use that. They would observe the efficiency of Roman engineering and conclude it was a principle worth borrowing. They had extensive contact with the Egyptians, and so the concepts of their powerful gods and monumental tombs were absorbed and reshaped into something uniquely Nabataean. There was no imperial ego here, no insistence that their way was the only way. Their strength lay in their humility and their sharp eye for quality, wherever they might find it. Their society reflected this blend of nomadic spirit and settled ambition. Their kings, with names like Oasis and Malachus, ruled not from on high, but as custodians of the community's lifeblood, water and trade. We find a kingdom built on a shared secret, where the knowledge of cistern locations and caravan schedules was the true crown jewel. Their chief god, Dushara, was associated with the mountains and the unhewn stone blocks that represented his power. He was a god of this place, a deity whose presence was felt in the towering cliffs themselves. To carve a tomb or a temple into the rock was not merely an act of construction. It was a conversation with the divine, a way of embedding their existence into the eternal landscape. This fusion of practicality and piety created a people of incredible resilience. For over 300 years, they thrived on the edge of massive warring empires. The Seleucids, the Ptolemies, and eventually the Romans all cast covetous eyes on their immense wealth, yet the Nabataeans endured. They were masters of asymmetrical warfare, melting into the desert that was their fortress, leaving would-be conquerors to be defeated not by armies, but by thirst. They had perfected their world, creating a system that was a closed, beautiful, and fantastically profitable loop. They had mastered every variable in their desert equation, never imagining that the world itself was about to change the math forever. It takes a certain kind of audacity to look at a bone-dry landscape, one that kills the unprepared in a matter of hours, and decide to build a metropolis. We have seen the Nabataeans' pragmatism, their ability to adapt and absorb the best ideas from surrounding cultures. Here, in the very veins of their city, we witness that pragmatism transformed into something bordering on miraculous. They did not simply find water. They hunted it, captured it, and domesticated it on an industrial scale. This was not just survival, it was a profound statement of dominance over the harshest of environments. Let us stand for a moment on the high plateau above the city. The air is thin, the sun relentless. What we are looking at is the beginning of the entire system. The desert receives on average less than 15 centimeters of rain per year. But when it rains, it is not a gentle shower. It is a deluge, a wall of water that scours the landscape. To any other people, this would be a terrifying, destructive force. To the Nabataeans, it was a harvest. We can trace with our eyes the intricate network of small channels and conduits they carved directly into the vast sandstone surfaces all around us. They turned the entire plateau into a gigantic collection basin, a catchment area covering dozens of square kilometers. Every precious drop was accounted for. From these upper plains, the water was guided, not by chance, but with the precision of a master surgeon. Gravity was their engine. They built hundreds of small dams to slow the torrents, forcing the water into their network. Let's follow one of these stone arteries. The channel descends, winding along the contours of the rock, a testament to countless hours of labor and brilliant surveying. Before the water even reached the city proper, it was directed into a series of settling tanks. Here, the silt and debris from the flood would slowly sink, purifying the water before it entered the main circulatory system. This was a crucial, often overlooked step. They understood that clean water was not just about quantity. It was about quality. Now we can see where the true magic happens. The clarified water was funneled into an incredible subterranean world. Imagine a hidden plumbing system on a city-wide scale. Terracotta pipes, expertly crafted and sealed with waterproof mortar, snake through the rock, feeding into more than 200 enormous cisterns. These were not just crude pits. They were vast, echoing chambers, painstakingly carved out and lined with a special plaster to prevent any seepage. The total storage capacity was staggering, estimated at over 40 million liters. It was enough to sustain a population of 30,000 people, plus their animals and gardens, through years of sustained drought. They had effectively built a liquid bank account, a reservoir of life that made them immune to the whims of the desert climate. This underground wealth was then distributed with remarkable sophistication. Within the city, lead pipes, a technology likely borrowed from their Roman trading partners, carried water directly to neighborhoods, public fountains, and even the villas of the wealthy. We can still see the remains of the Grand Nymphaeum, a public fountain that would have been a social hub, a place of stunning beauty where fresh, clean water splashed day and night. They even engineered a massive open-air swimming pool, a display of almost decadent luxury in the heart of the desert. For the Nabataeans, water was more than life. It was a symbol of their power, a currency of their ingenuity, and the ultimate proof that they had created a perfect, self-sustaining world, a paradise built on stone and sustained by the clever theft of a storm. Their mastery over water created a stage, a magnificent, life-giving platform. But the performance that took place upon it, the true source of Petra's legendary wealth, was fueled by something far more ethereal, a fragrance. To understand the Nabataeans is to understand the smell of money in the ancient world, and that smell was of frankincense and myrrh. Let us follow the scent of that power, down the dusty tracks that funneled the riches of an entire continent into this one hidden city. These were not mere perfumes. They were the bridge between the mortal and the divine. The smoke from burning frankincense was believed to carry prayers directly to the heavens, an essential ingredient in the temples of Rome and the sacred rites of Egypt. Myrrh was an anointing oil, a medicine, and a key component in the embalming process that promised eternal life. For nearly 500 years, these resins were worth more than their weight in gold, and the Nabataeans controlled the entire supply chain. The source of this incredible wealth lay far to the south, in the remote, almost mythical lands of what is now Yemen and Oman. But getting it from there to the lucrative markets of the Mediterranean was a journey of biblical proportions. We must picture the Incense Road not as a highway, but as a perilous thread stretched across more than 1,600 kilometers of brutal, unforgiving desert. Caravans of 1,000 camels or more would move slowly across this landscape, their cargo a moving treasure chest that attracted every bandit and warlord in the region. To lose your way was to die of thirst. To be caught alone was to lose everything. And right in the middle of this deadly chessboard sat Petra, the one guaranteed safe square. It was the only place where a caravan could find absolute security, abundant water, and a place to rest and trade. Here we see the true genius of the Nabataean business model. They were not just toll collectors, they were service providers. Their patrols kept the surrounding trade routes secure. Their vast cisterns rehydrated thousands of exhausted animals and men. Their markets provided a place for merchants to repair equipment, trade goods, and gather intelligence for the next leg of their journey. In return for this 5-star desert experience, they levied a handsome tax, often as much as 25% of the value of the goods passing through. It was an offer no one could refuse. The cost of security was steep, but the cost of going around them was infinitely higher. This revenue stream was not a trickle. It was a deluge of gold, silver, and precious goods that flowed into the city's coffers year after year, decade after decade. As we stand in the remains of the colonnaded street, we can almost hear the bustle of this ancient global exchange. We would hear the guttural languages of Arabian traders, the Latin of Roman merchants, the Greek of speculators from Alexandria, all haggling over wares. The air would be thick with the smells of spices, tanned leather, and the ever-present sacred perfume of the resins that paid for every magnificent tomb and temple carved into the surrounding cliffs. The iconic building we call the Treasury, Al-Khazna, was almost certainly a royal tomb, but its popular name reveals an essential truth. The city itself was a vault, a fortress built to protect the most profitable monopoly on earth. The Nabataeans had perfected a closed system. Their geography gave them a choke point, their engineering gave them the water to exploit it, and their commercial acumen turned it into an engine of unimaginable wealth. They had built their kingdom on a single fragrant road, utterly convinced that all paths to true power would forever lead through their gates. With the coffers of their kingdom overflowing, the Nabataeans did what every prosperous civilization does. They began to build. But they did not build with brick and mortar laid upon the ground. They turned their entire city into a canvas, their wealth into chisels, and began to carve an empire directly from the living rock. Let us now imagine ourselves standing on the main colonnaded street during the 1st century of the Common Era. This is the zenith, the golden age of Petra. The raw, primal power of the canyons is now tamed by the elegant lines of Hellenistic architecture. The city is no longer just a clever fortress in a marketplace. It has become a statement of cultural and artistic ambition. This transformation was breathtaking in its scope. We can see it in the remains of the Great Temple, a sprawling complex of columns and grand staircases that would have dominated the city center. We witness it in the massive theater, capable of seating over 8,000 spectators, its perfect acoustics carrying the sounds of Greek plays and civic announcements across the valley. These were not hidden tombs for the dead. They were grand public spaces for the living. The Nabataeans were announcing to the world and to themselves that they had arrived. They were no longer just the clever nomads who controlled the roads. They were the architects of a permanent, magnificent civilization, a peer to the great cities of Alexandria and Rome. What we are looking at is the work of master artisans whose names are lost to history, but whose genius is undeniable. Think of the sheer audacity of their method. To create these facades, they did not build up from a foundation. They started at the very top of a cliff face, sometimes hundreds of feet in the air, and carved their way down. Every column, every capital, every intricate floral detail had to be perfectly planned from the outset. There was no room for error. A single miscalculation with a chisel could mar the entire project, a mistake that could not be erased. As we trace the clean, confident lines of their work, we are left to wonder at the nerves of steel and the profound mathematical understanding these craftsmen must have possessed. This explosion of art and architecture was presided over by their most influential monarch, King Aretas IV, a man who styled himself the one who loves his people. Under his nearly 40-year reign, Petra truly bloomed. He was the great patron of the city, funding the construction that transformed its face. We see a society confident in its unique identity, a place where the elite could lounge by a swimming pool discussing Greek philosophy while still honoring their ancestral desert deities. Their coins from this period show a fusion of styles. Their pottery is among the finest in the ancient world, and their unique script evolved into the precursor of modern Arabic. They were creating a culture as sophisticated and unique as their water systems. And as they perfected their beautiful, isolated world, they engaged in a delicate diplomatic dance with the rising superpower to the west, Rome. For a time, the relationship was mutually beneficial. The Nabataeans were a reliable client kingdom, a buffer state that kept the volatile Arabian tribes in check. Roman merchants were their biggest customers, and Roman engineering ideas undoubtedly influenced their later constructions. They saw Rome not as a threat, but as a vast, wealthy market to be expertly managed. From their rock-hewn paradise surrounded by an ocean of sand, they believed their position was unassailable. Their entire civilization, their art, their wealth, and their future were all built upon the bedrock of a single, unshakable assumption that the world would always come to them. That unshakable assumption, however, had a fatal flaw. It failed to account for an empire that did not travel to the world, but remade the world in its own image. While the Nabataeans were perfecting their intricate paradise hewn from rock, Rome was perfecting conquest. For centuries, the two powers had maintained a delicate, profitable equilibrium. Petra was the gateway to the exotic East, and Rome was its best customer. But as the first century of the Common Era drew to a close, a new kind of emperor sat upon the throne, a man of military steel and boundless ambition named Trajan, who saw the world not as a collection of trading partners, but as a map to be colored in a single shade, Roman red. Here we witness a fundamental clash of worldviews. The Nabataean genius was for subtlety, for managing flows of commerce and water through influence and incentive. Their power was indirect, built on being the indispensable middleman. Trajan's genius was for direct control. He saw an inefficient frontier, a client kingdom siphoning off vast profits that could be flowing directly into the Roman treasury. The very existence of a prosperous, independent Nabataea on the edge of his empire was an untidy variable in an equation he was determined to solve. The fragrant smoke of incense that smelled like money to the Nabataeans smelled to Trajan like an unacceptable customs duty. The end did not come with a great battle or a heroic last stand in the narrow CQ. That was not the Roman way when the odds were so overwhelmingly in their favor. Let us picture the scene in the year 106 of the Common Era. It was not a conquering army that arrived, but a message, a quiet, unassailable directive delivered by the Roman governor of Syria, Cornelius Palma. The last Nabataean king, Rabble II, had died, and Rome was simply exercising its perceived right to absorb the kingdom. There would be no war. There would simply be a change of management. We can imagine the shock within the colonnaded streets of Petra. The Nabataeans, masters of desert warfare, who could lose an army in the sands, were completely defenseless against a political maneuver. Their wealth could not buy them legions, and their intricate water systems could not stop the stroke of an imperial pen. Overnight, the kingdom of Nabataea was gone. In its place, Rome created a new province, Arabia Petraea. The Romans were practical rulers. They did not sack the city or destroy its monuments. On the contrary, they began to improve it according to their own formidable standards. They paved the main street, enhanced the public spaces, and added their own architectural flourishes. They sought to integrate Petra to make it a productive part of the imperial machine. They immediately began construction on a massive new infrastructure project, a wide, straight road, the Via Traiana Nova, designed to connect the Red Sea ports directly with Syria, streamlining military and commercial traffic. To the Roman mind, this was progress. It was the imposition of order upon a chaotic landscape. They were bringing the full benefits of Roman civilization to this remote desert outpost. We can almost see the Roman engineers with their tripods and measuring lines looking at the winding ancient caravan paths with disdain. They were laying down a new reality in stone and gravel, a path that promised efficiency and control. What no one understood at the time was that this new road was not just bypassing the old sacred trails of the incense trade. It was paving over the very soul of Petra. For a time, life under Roman administration seemed like a simple evolution. The grandeur of Petra was not diminished. If anything, it was amplified with Roman efficiency. The Via Traiana Nova was a marvel of engineering, a testament to an empire that built for eternity. Yet, while Roman engineers were straightening the paths of the desert, Roman sailors far to the south were rewriting the rules of the entire game. Let us now turn our gaze from the stone canyons to the open, windswept waters of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Here we discover the true Roman genius was not just for conquest, but for optimization on a global scale. It was here, on the high seas, that the fate of Petra was truly sealed. The Nabataeans had mastered a river of sand. The Romans were about to master an ocean of water. For centuries, maritime trade with the East had been a cautious, coast-hugging affair, a slow and laborious process. But sometime in the 1st century, Roman navigators, likely guided by Greek and Arab sailors, fully harnessed the secret of the monsoon winds. They discovered that for 6 months of the year, the winds blew predictably from the southwest, and for the other 6, they blew from the northeast. A ship could now sail from an Egyptian port like Berenice, catch the summer monsoon, and be carried directly across the open ocean to the shores of India in a matter of weeks. It was a predictable, reliable, and astonishingly fast sea highway. We must grasp the sheer economic disruption this caused. Let us picture the 2 journeys. A camel caravan, laden with incense, faced a trek of more than 2 months across a hostile desert. It required hundreds of animals, dozens of armed guards, and paid exorbitant taxes at every stop, with Petra levying the largest fee of all. A single Roman merchant ship, by contrast, could carry the cargo of 1,000 camels. It required only a small crew, and its only real tax was paid once at its destination port. The math was brutal and inescapable. The sea route was not just cheaper, it was exponentially cheaper and faster. The overland Incense Road had been rendered obsolete with the turning of the tide. The effect on Petra was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow, creeping silence. The change would have been almost imperceptible at first. Perhaps one year, the Great Autumn Caravan was slightly smaller than the last. Then, a few years later, a prominent merchant who dealt in rare spices from the east simply closed his shop on the colonnaded street. We can imagine the Nabataean elite standing on the steps of the great temple, watching the Via Traiana Nova and wondering why the flow of commerce had thinned to a trickle. The very road the Romans built to streamline trade to their city now served only to emphasize its growing isolation. The world's traffic was no longer flowing through their magnificent gates. It was sailing past them, miles away on an azure sea. This was not an act of war or malice from Rome. It was something far more lethal, a footnote in an accountant's ledger. The empire was simply routing its supply chain along the most efficient path. The Nabataeans, who had built a kingdom on being an unavoidable geographical necessity, suddenly found themselves in a world where geography had been redrawn by the wind. Their beautiful city, a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering and commercial savvy, was becoming an exquisite relic. It was a perfect solution to a problem that no longer existed, a lock for a door the world had decided to walk around. The Great Stone Theater, once a stage for celebrating prosperity, now became a silent witness to its slow departure. The economic lifeblood of Petra had not been severed in a single clean stroke. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, the slow bleeding of a commercial artery that had once pulsed with the wealth of nations. Let us walk again down the colonnaded street, but this time a century later, around the year 200 of the Common Era. The air is different. The vibrant chaos of 100 languages haggling over silks and spices has faded into a quiet, orderly hum. The Roman administration is efficient, but efficiency cannot create demand where none exists. Here we can observe the subtle, heartbreaking signs of a city living on its inheritance. The grand facades are still magnificent, but the shops at their bases tell a new story. Where once a dealer of rare Arabian perfumes displayed his wares, we now find a simple potter selling local goods. The stall that traded in ivory from Africa now offers goat hides and wool. The economy was turning inward, shrinking back to a scale that could be sustained by the surrounding province, not the world. We can almost feel the quiet desperation of a merchant class whose entire expertise, generations of knowledge about long-distance trade and desert logistics, was now as useless as a map of a forgotten road. This was a paradigm shift they could not comprehend, let alone combat. Their entire world, a system perfected over 400 years, was predicated on their unique geographical position. They were the gatekeepers. But the world, under Rome's guidance, had simply built a new house with a different door. There were no armies to fight, no rivals to outsmart. How do you wage war against an economic spreadsheet? How do you bargain with the logic of a monsoon wind? The Nabataeans, for all their resilience, were masters of a single game. When the rules changed, they were left holding cards that had no value. The consequences rippled through every level of their society. The master stone carvers, whose ancestors had shaped the treasury and the monastery, now found few patrons wealthy enough to commission such monumental tombs. Construction slowed and then stopped altogether. The city began to feel like a museum to its own past, a place where people lived in the shadows of a grandeur they could no longer afford to create. The elaborate water systems, a monument to their genius, continued to function, but they now nourished a city whose ambition was drying up. It was a beautiful, intricate machine, perfectly maintained, but its purpose was slowly vanishing. The final devastating blow was not delivered by human hands. In the year 363, the very ground beneath Petra betrayed it. A massive earthquake tore through the region, a cataclysm of unimaginable force. We can see the evidence of its fury everywhere. Columns toppled, facades cracked, and vital sections of their water channels, the very heart of their city, were shattered. For a community already weakened by economic decline, this was an almost insurmountable wound. Rebuilding on such a scale required wealth and a collective will they no longer possessed. The great city, already a ghost of its former self, was now physically broken, its magnificent bones fractured by the indifferent power of the earth. The dust from the great quake of 363 would have taken weeks to settle, but the silence that followed would last for 1,000 years. For the people of Petra, this was not just a natural disaster, it was a verdict, a final crushing judgment on a city that had already lost its purpose. The earth had broken what commerce had already abandoned. Let us walk through the ruins in the immediate aftermath. The grand colonnaded street, once the envy of Roman governors, is now a graveyard of fractured columns. The great temple, the heart of civic life, is a ruin, its monumental staircase leading to a pile of rubble. But the most devastating damage is hidden deep within the rock. Here we find the true tragedy. The intricate network of pipes and channels, the very circulatory system that gave life to this impossible city, was fractured beyond simple repair. We can imagine the Nabataean descendants, inheritors of a genius they could no longer replicate, standing before a shattered aqueduct. The knowledge of their ancestors, the surveyors and engineers who bent gravity to their will, was now the stuff of legend. They could patch and mend, but they could not resurrect the whole. The city's fountains, once a symbol of extravagant power, fell silent one by one. The gardens withered. The great swimming pool became a dusty pit. Petra began to die of thirst, a slow, ironic end for the masters of desert hydraulics. Into this vacuum of wealth and certainty, a new power began to flow, not of water, but of faith. As the 4th century gave way to the 5th, the Roman Empire was transforming, embracing a new god. Christianity arrived in Petra not with the force of an earthquake, but with the quiet insistence of a desert wind. We see its arrival etched directly over the old world. Let us look closer at the urn tomb, one of the great royal sepulchres. High on its facade, we can see crude crosses carved into the sandstone, transforming a king's resting place into a Byzantine cathedral. Temples dedicated to Dashara and Al-Uzza were repurposed, their pagan idols cast down, and their altars reconsecrated. We are watching the soul of the city being rewritten. Petra's role in the world had fundamentally changed. It was no longer a vital commercial hub, but a remote bishopric, a quiet provincial outpost in the Byzantine Empire. Life continued, but it was a smaller, more circumscribed existence. We can picture the remaining inhabitants living like ghosts among the grandeur of their past, seeking shelter in the vast, empty tombs carved by their ancestors. The main street, once bustling with merchants from across the known world, now saw only the passage of local farmers and the occasional pilgrimage. The city had become a relic while people were still living in it, a place haunted by the memory of a greatness that felt impossibly distant. The final abandonment was not a single event, but a slow, quiet exodus over generations. The Islamic conquests of the 7th century redrew the political and trade maps of the Middle East once again, leaving Petra even more isolated. Another series of earthquakes in the following centuries delivered further blows. People simply drifted away, moving to places with more water, more opportunity, more of a future. Let us imagine the last family packing their belongings, their footsteps echoing in the vast silence of the sea-quay. They would not have looked back with a sense of historic loss, but with the simple, pragmatic calculation that life was better elsewhere. The last footsteps faded, absorbed by the sand. Petra, a city born from a secret understanding of water, now returned to the custody of the dry, silent rock, its grand story waiting in the darkness for someone new to come and listen. The Roman eagle did not arrive in Petra on a storm of fire and steel, but with the quiet, inexorable efficiency of a master accountant closing a ledger. Let us stand for a moment with the Nabataean merchants in the shadow of the treasury in the year 107 of the Common Era. The legions of Rome are not sacking their city, they are paving it. The sound that now echoes through the Psyche is not the chatter of 1,000 traders, but the rhythmic chip-chip-chip of the military engineer's hammer, laying down perfectly flat, precisely angled flagstones over the worn, familiar paths their ancestors had walked for centuries. We are watching a city's very soul being resurfaced. This was not subjugation in the traditional sense, it was an upgrade. At least, that is how Rome presented it. The Romans brought with them an almost religious belief in infrastructure. They expanded upon the existing public spaces, adding the unmistakable signature of their civilization, a grand public bathhouse. We can almost picture the scene. The Nabataean elite, men whose families had grown rich on desert secrets and shrewd negotiation, now found themselves discussing provincial taxes while sweating in a Roman-style caldarium. It was a new kind of power, one based not on controlling a trade route, but on conforming to a new universal standard of civic life. Here we see the two worlds colliding in stone and language. Latin inscriptions begin to appear, stark and official, next to the elegant flowing script of the Nabataeans. The old royal family was gone, replaced by a Roman governor who answered to an emperor 1,000 miles away. The local aristocracy, however, was co-opted. They were made magistrates, city councilors, and priests in the imperial cult, given Roman titles and the privilege of wearing the toga on official business. Their wealth was largely left intact, but their autonomy was gone. They were no longer the masters of their own destiny, but the managers of a remote imperial asset. For a generation, this new order brought a strange final bloom of prosperity. Petra became the jewel of Arabia Petraea, a showpiece of Roman administration in the East. With Roman security came a new sense of permanence. Grand villas were built, adorned with vibrant frescoes and intricate mosaics, signs of a populace investing in a stable future. The city had never been more orderly, more magnificent, or more Roman. The great theater echoed with new performances, and the colonnaded street, Now a smooth, wide avenue shone under the desert sun. It was the most beautiful cage, impeccably designed and lavishly furnished. We can imagine the Roman engineers looking with satisfaction upon their completed work. The roads were straight, the administration was efficient, and the province was peaceful. They had tamed the wild heart of the desert kingdom and integrated it flawlessly into the grand imperial machine. They had connected it, secured it, and improved it by every metric they understood. They stood on their newly paved streets, admiring their handiwork, utterly unaware that in the distant ports of Egypt, their own countrymen were perfecting a technology of wind and water that would make all this magnificent stone utterly irrelevant. The flawless Roman pavement felt cool under the evening sky, a smooth stone river flowing where a dirt track once ran. But a riverbed, no matter how perfectly engineered, is defined by its current. And here in Petra, a generation after the eagles had landed, the current was failing. Let us stand by the city's grand triple-arched gate, a monument built to welcome the world. The world, it seemed, was increasingly busy elsewhere. The great caravans, those 1,000-camel processions that were once the lifeblood of this city, had become a memory, a story old men told to wide-eyed children. Now, the gate framed only local farmers returning from their fields and the occasional dusty Roman patrol, their presence a reminder of an order that provided security for a treasure that no longer arrived. This was not a sudden poverty. It was a gradual, creeping irrelevance. We can see it in the changing fortunes of the city's great families, dynasties built on the secret knowledge of the desert. Imagine a man whose great-grandfather had guided caravans worth more than a senator's entire estate. That man now finds his own sons seeking careers not as masters of the spice road, but as clerks in the Roman provincial administration. The intricate knowledge of hidden wells, of tribal alliances, of navigating by the stars, a skill set once passed down as a sacred inheritance, was becoming folklore. We witness a whole class of experts, the architects of Petra's wealth, being quietly, politely, made redundant by a map redrawn with sea lanes instead of sand paths. From the governor's palace, the report sent back to Rome would have painted a picture of serene stability. Arabia Petraea was a peaceful province. The taxes were collected. The populace was orderly. For the vast, unsentimental imperial bureaucracy, Petra was performing its function perfectly. It was a stable anchor on the eastern frontier. But Rome's attention, and more importantly its investment, was drifting. The real action was now in the bustling ports along the Red Sea, cities like Isla, where ships laden with silks and pepper from India docked daily. That was the new frontier of commerce. Petra, with its magnificent rock-hewn tombs and elaborate waterworks, was becoming a beautiful, expensive, and strategically unimportant inheritance. Let us wander through the markets that line the colonnaded street. The city does not look poor. The facades are still breathtaking, the public fountains still flow, a testament to the enduring genius of their builders. Yet the goods for sale tell the real story. The stalls that once glittered with Indian gems and fragrant Arabian resins now display locally made pottery, woolen cloaks, and sacks of grain. The global marketplace has shrunk to a regional town square. Petra was slowly learning to live off its own land, a profound change for a city that had once functioned as the world's most glorious toll booth. The wealth we see is static, frozen in the stone of past glories. It is a bank account with no new deposits. Here, in the quiet spaces between the grand monuments, we can feel the city's spirit beginning to hollow out. The ambition that drove men to carve temples from mountainsides was evaporating. Why commission a magnificent tomb when your family's fortune dwindles with each passing year? The Nabataeans were watching their entire identity, their very reason for being, slip through their fingers, taken not by an enemy they could fight, but by the quiet logic of a shipping ledger thousands of miles away. The silence that was settling over the city was not peaceful. It was the sound of a purpose draining away, leaving behind a magnificent stone shell, waiting for the winds of change to fill it with sand. Let us move away from the main thoroughfare, where the Roman flagstones still impose a semblance of order, and into the quieter side canyons where the true story of the 3rd century is being told. Here we can see that the city is not falling, it is fraying at the edges. We find a grand tomb, its facade once the pride of a wealthy spice merchant, now serving as a makeshift shelter for a family of goat herds. The smoke from their cooking fire has blackened the sandstone above the doorway, a dark smudge across a masterpiece. This is not desecration born of malice. It is the simple, pragmatic act of a people adapting to a new reality. The immense hollow spaces built for eternal glory are now being repurposed for the humble necessities of daily life. The most insidious decay is the one we cannot easily see. It is the slow, creeping failure of knowledge. For generations, the genius of Petra was a living tradition, a set of skills passed from master to apprentice. Now, that chain is breaking. We can trace the path of a single leaking water channel, a steady drip, drip, drip that forms a dark stain on the rock. A century earlier, this would have been repaired within a day by craftsmen who knew the precise mixture of lime and ash for the waterproof mortar. Now, the leak continues, a small wound in the city's circulatory system. No one is left who remembers the old ways with the same certainty. We witness a city slowly forgetting the engineering secrets that allowed it to exist in the first place. This growing void of purpose and certainty created fertile ground for a new idea, a story that offered meaning beyond wealth and earthly power. Let us imagine a small gathering, not in the shadow of the great temple, but within the cool confines of a repurposed storeroom. They are Christians, and their numbers are growing. Their faith speaks not of monopolies and trade routes, but of salvation and an eternal kingdom that owes nothing to Rome or the price of incense. This new belief provides a powerful framework for a community whose old identity has been stripped away. It offers a new kind of strength, one found in fellowship and devotion rather than in commerce and grand construction. We see the beginnings of a profound spiritual pivot, a city turning its gaze from the deserts of Arabia to the heavens. The Roman administrators, tasked with maintaining order, would have barely noticed these subtle shifts. The province remained peaceful, its people quiet and self-sustaining. But Petra was hollowing out from the inside. It was becoming a city of ghosts long before it was abandoned. The echoes in the CQ were changing. They no longer carried the sound of 1,000 camels arriving with the riches of the East, but the quiet chants of a new faith and the whisper of the wind through ever-widening cracks in the stone. The whispers in the stone were no longer of commerce and kings, but of memory and prayer, the final testament of a people learning to live within the magnificent tomb of their own golden age. Let us now advance our timeline, pushing through another 2 centuries of quiet persistence until we arrive at the year 551. The Christian community of Petra has endured, their prayers echoing in halls that were built to honor forgotten gods. But the earth beneath them has a long and unforgiving memory. Another tremor, far more violent than the one that came before, rips through the valley. This time, the damage is not a wound, it is a final, mortal blow. What we are witnessing is the physical unraveling of a city. The colonnaded street, repaired and maintained for generations, is now an impassable field of shattered drums and capitals. The great Nymphaeum, The once glorious public fountain is a choked ruin, its water source severed for good. We can almost hear the final gasp of the city's hydraulic heart. The aftermath of this cataclysm is profoundly different. After the earthquake of 363, there was an attempt to rebuild, to restore the civic order. Now, there's only salvage. The instinct is no longer to restore the grand avenues, but to scavenge their stones to build smaller, more defensible walls for the few who remain. The city ceases to be a single coherent entity and becomes a quarry for its own inhabitants. Imagine the decision facing a family. Do you try to repair your elegant but crumbling Byzantine villa? Or do you move into the solid, unyielding chamber of a 2,000-year-old tomb, a structure that has now weathered every shock the world could throw at it? The great necropolis, once the city of the dead, becomes the last refuge for the living. Into this fractured landscape rides a new force that will redraw the map of the world forever. The armies of the nascent Islamic Caliphate sweep out of Arabia in the 7th century, their movement swift and decisive. But for Petra, there is no great battle, no dramatic siege. The city is no longer a strategic prize. It is a backwater, a collection of ruins inhabited by a few hardy souls. The new trade routes established by the caliphs run from Damascus to Cairo, far to the north, leaving Petra in a silent, forgotten valley. Its isolation is now complete. It is not on the road to anywhere important. For the last remaining inhabitants, this is the final signal. The world has not just moved on, it has forgotten the path to their door. We are now witnesses to the final exodus. This is not a flight from a conquering army, but a quiet, pragmatic departure. A family gathers their goats, their cooking pots, and the few heirlooms they possess. They walk out through the Syke, that once grand entrance that saw the passage of kings and incense caravans, and they do not look back. There is nothing left for them here but magnificent, thirsty ghosts and the threat of falling stones. The last church holds its final service, its prayers absorbed by the immense silence. The city is not conquered, it is relinquished, given back to the desert and the wind. For 1,000 years, Petra disappears from the memory of the outside world. It becomes a place of myth, a secret known only to the local Bedouin tribes, who use its cool tombs for shelter and whisper stories of a great king's treasure hidden in the urn of Al-Khazna. They become the city's unknowing custodians, their presence a faint human echo in a place built for multitudes. The silence that fell was so profound it has weight, pressing down on the empty temples and the silent theater, preserving them under a blanket of sun and sand. The masters of water were gone, their incredible city now a stone skeleton waiting for a future that would have to rediscover it all over again. The silence that consumed Petra was not empty. It was filled with the whispers of the jinn and the slow grinding work of the wind, which for 1,000 years acted as the city's sole sculptor and caretaker. On the maps of the great European powers, this entire region was a blank space, an unknown quarter where dragons might still be found. The city of the Nabataeans had not just fallen into ruin, it had fallen out of human memory, a secret so well kept by the desert that it had become a myth. To break that silence would require a man as patient, as resilient, and as clever as the people who first built this place. That man would arrive in the year 1812. Let us now meet Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss scholar with an adventurer's heart, a man so fluent in Arabic and knowledgeable of Islamic customs that he moved through the world as Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdullah. His grand ambition was to find the source of the Niger River, a quest that had consumed many European explorers. The lost city of Petra was not his destination. It was a rumor, a tantalizing whisper he heard from local tribesmen about a valley of fantastic ruins near the supposed tomb of Aaron, the brother of Moses. We can picture him, his mind ablaze with curiosity, formulating a plan not of conquest, but of delicate infiltration. He knew that any direct inquiry from a foreigner would be met with suspicion and violence. The Bedouin guarded these lands jealously, convinced that any European was a sorcerer seeking treasure. His solution was a masterstroke of cultural empathy and deception. He announced his intention to fulfill a vow to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of Aaron on the mountain of Jabal Haroun. It was a pious and understandable request, one that put his local guide in an awkward position. To deny such a religious pilgrimage would be unseemly. And so, with a reluctant guide and a goat for slaughter, Burckhardt began his journey towards the myth. Let us follow in his footsteps as he is led down a narrow, unassuming riverbed. We can feel the tension, the Swiss explorer maintaining a facade of calm devotion, while every nerve is alight with anticipation. His guide is wary, his eyes constantly scanning, his silence a heavy presence beside them. Then they enter the Saiku. The world shrinks to a sliver of sky between towering walls of rose-colored stone. We witness the guide's pace quicken, eager to pass through this strange, sacred passage. But Burckhardt slows his steps, his scholar's eye taking in the ghost of a paved road beneath his feet, the faint lines of water channels carved into the walls, evidence of a sophisticated world now vanished. His heart must have been pounding in his chest, a drumbeat against the canyon's deep silence. And then, after more than a kilometer in the beautiful claustrophobic darkness, the sliver of light ahead of him began to resolve into an impossible shape. The canyon suddenly gives way, like a curtain pulled back to reveal a stage. There, bathed in a soft reflected glow, stands Al-Khazna, the treasury. It is not a ruin. It is a perfect, breathtaking apparition, a facade of impossible grace materialized from the cliff face. We must imagine the shock, the thunderbolt of revelation that strikes Burckhardt. The legends were not just true. They were an understatement. He has to bite back his cry of astonishment, forcing his face into a mask of pious indifference for his watchful guide. He cannot sketch, he cannot take notes, he can only burn this image into his memory. He plays his part, continuing the trek through the valley, glimpsing the theater, the colonnaded street, the endless tombs, a city of ghosts laid bare under the sun. After his sacrifice on the mountain, he departs, his mind a vault containing a secret of monumental significance. The city that had died because the world forgot its location was about to be reborn, its story ignited once more by a single man who understood the profound power of a pilgrimage. Burckhardt's quiet departure shattered the silence of 1,000 years with a flood of ink and imagination. His journals, published after his death, unleashed Petra upon a world hungry for romance and antiquity. Artists, poets, and adventurers followed in his cautious footsteps, their sketches and stories painting a portrait of a city suspended between myth and reality. We can almost see them, the first wide-eyed European travelers, standing where we stand now, their minds struggling to reconcile the sublime artistry of the treasury with the profound emptiness of the valley. Petra was no longer a secret of the Bedouin. It had become a shared dream of the entire world, the ultimate symbol of a lost civilization. This wave of romantic rediscovery soon gave way to the meticulous work of the archaeologist. The picks and brushes of the 20th century began to uncover the truth beneath the sand, revealing a story far more complex than a simple tale of lost treasure. As we look around us today, we are seeing the fruits of their labor. They unearthed the vast temple complexes, traced the lines of the hidden water conduits, and pieced together the fragments of pottery that told the story of a global trade network. They revealed that the Nabataeans were not just mysterious tomb builders, but sophisticated urban planners, hydraulic engineers of the highest order, and savvy international merchants. We learned that their fall from grace was not the result of war or pestilence, but of a quiet, almost invisible economic shift thousands of miles away. Here, we find the most potent and humbling lesson Petra has to teach us. The Nabataeans built a perfect system, a flawless machine for generating wealth based on a single, unassailable geographic advantage. They were the masters of the Incense Road. Their error was not one of ingenuity, but of imagination. They could not conceive of a world where that road was no longer the center of the universe. They had perfected an answer, but the world had quietly changed the question. Their entire civilization was a monument to the dangers of over-specialization, a cautionary tale written in stone about what happens when an entire culture bets its future on a monopoly that proves to be temporary. They were masters of their world, never suspecting that the world itself could be redrawn. And yet, as we stand here now, surrounded by this impossible beauty, to remember them only for their failure feels profoundly wrong. Their ultimate legacy is not the wealth they lost, but the sheer audacity of what they created. They looked at a vertical desert, a place of sheer cliffs and scorching heat, and saw not an obstacle, but a canvas. They understood that the most unforgiving environment holds within it the secrets to its own conquest. Their ability to harvest a flash flood, to turn a canyon into a cistern, and to carve a metropolis from living rock is a timeless testament to human resilience and adaptation. They remind us that civilization is not just about what you have, but about what you can create from the world you are given. The ghost of their forgotten economy is just a footnote. The enduring power of their engineering sings from every stone. Let us take one last walk back through the Psyche, the canyon walls once more enclosing us in their ancient embrace. We leave behind a city of ghosts, but we carry with us its powerful contradictory lessons, a warning against the fragility of any system that refuses to adapt, and an inspiration to meet the challenges of our own world with the same bold creativity. The Nabataeans teach us that even the most brilliant solutions have an expiration date, which leads us to a crucial question for our own time. What is the unshakable foundation of our modern world that might be far more fragile than we imagine? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. To continue exploring the incredible rise and fall of great civilizations with us, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for notifications.